Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. My name is Chelsea Kimball Badgett. I am a core outreach team member for the Education Project, who's emphasized outreach efforts for the Boston and Springfield school districts, and I'll be moderating this event. I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Please note our chat feature is open for organizations and audience members looking to provide their contact information for further engagement with our project moving forward. We will address any questions posed in this chat after the event. We will kick off our launch event with a brief video from Humanity First USA, the nonprofit we have been fortunate to working with in launching our project.
When we look across the world, we see so much destruction from conflicts, wars, and natural disasters, and even more so we see the continuous and cyclical plight of millions of human beings. And to make matters worse, we are currently experiencing a truly once-in-a-lifetime deadly pandemic that has crippled nearly all facets of our society's functions. For over 25 years, Humanity First has worked and continues to work to serve humanity through all its struggles and hardships across the globe. Our mission began with Bosnia during a bloody civil war, and over the years we have helped serve humanity through disaster relief and human development efforts across 5 continents. We have worked to provide relief in multiple international disasters, including, but not limited to, the Indonesian tsunami, as well as the Haiti, Kashmir, and Japan earthquakes. Our disaster relief efforts in the United States focus on assisting ongoing recovery efforts after the devastation brought on by natural disasters such as Hurricanes Sandy, Katrina, Ike, Harvey, and Dorian, as well as many others. We have been working tirelessly for the past 6 months to fight the effects of COVID-19 in the United States, as we've set up food pantries across the nation, serving over 1.3 million meals, and organized a Make a Mask campaign to help provide masks to frontline workers. Human development is done through our Water for Life, Gift of Sight, and Knowledge for Life programs. Humanity First USA works to build wells and hand pumps that provide clean water in Africa and Asia. To see children jumping out of sheer excitement upon seeing water emerge from the ground for the first time in what feels like forever is truly breathtaking. The Gift of Sight program provides free cataract surgeries in Central and South America as well as Africa. A gift beyond any words or value to those who would never have thought they would ever see the world as it is through their own eyes. Additionally, we have also built under our subsidiary HF Healthcare Services a hospital in Guatemala and are also launching a new initiative called Doctors for Humanity to provide medical care to uninsured and underinsured patients in the United States, given the economic downturn and extraordinary rise in unemployment. Under the Knowledge for Life program, we help build schools in remote villages for children in Africa who used to have to walk miles and miles for a limited education. Martin Luther King once said, "All labor that uplifts humanity has dignity and importance and should be undertaken with painstaking excellence." Today, the Education Project recognizes the importance of uplifting the children of underserved communities that have been left behind and are disproportionately affected due to systemic racism and poverty, among other things. Our team has worked tirelessly to create this initiative, which we hope will be one of the leading free tutorial platforms for children in grades K through 12. During COVID-19, many children especially have fallen through the cracks of our education system, as parents across the nation struggle to balance teaching their children and maintaining their jobs, while others simply lack the proper and adequate resources to access their education amidst this virtual age. However, we cannot let them fall, and we will help them succeed, because we are Humanity First, serving mankind.
We are now pleased to welcome Mr. Manoom Naeem. Mr. Naeem is the President and Executive Director of Humanity First USA, a registered 501c3 nonprofit humanitarian organization that has served to create sustainable human development projects and responded to provide to all major disasters across America and internationally for the last 16 years. Mr. Naeem has been serving Humanity First in this role since its inception in 2004. Mr. Naeem has traveled to many developing countries across the globe in service to humanity, including Guatemala, Mexico, Haiti, Ghana, Liberia, Mali, Burkina Faso, Indonesia, Marshall Island, and Kashmir, Pakistan. Mr. Naeem professionally is an aeronautical engineer and an airline aviation aircraft maintenance executive.
Thank you, Chelsea. Much appreciated. It is really a great honor for me to represent the team of Humanity First and the passionate volunteers across the globe in 60 countries. Every program that we carry out is a special one, whether that is Water for Life, digging water wells, or Gift of Sight, or building hospitals or clinics for our global health program, or it is building school centers or skill centers for our Knowledge for Life program, or Feed the Hungry program. Each one is a special program for us, and each one has its own meaningful impact. In USA, we focus on our food pantry program, our disaster response program, and our Knowledge for Life program. I believe education education programs are one of the most important initiatives in our human development program. The education program that we are launching today is one of the important one, and we are very, very excited about it. So we know the disparity in our nation, driven in different demographics by poverty or ethnicity, and the impact that we have through COVID right now. So this program, we believe, is going to make a huge difference, and this enables us to reach out to those vulnerable children. So I really like to thank the Education Project team, Asim and Harass and Gauri, and the whole team of Tutors and everybody else who has joined this team for this effort. We are very excited, and I really like to thank our esteemed keynote speakers that we have today, Dr. Rodney and Dr. Matoma. Both of you, I really like to thank you on behalf of Humanity First, and also all of our viewers and audience who have joined us today. We like to thank you as well, and we look forward to your continued support, and also hoping that our nation will benefit from this program. So Chelsea, back to you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Director Naeem. We will now welcome Harass Qureshi to introduce to you all the Education Project. Harass is the co-founder and outreach director of the Education Project, launched under Humanity First USA. The project's mission is to provide high-quality remote tutoring and mentorship to students in need nationwide, completely free of cost. The vision is to create a world in which every student can receive the educational support they need, regardless of their socioeconomic status. A world where professionals and university students are willing to give their time to further the education of others. Harass is a biomedical engineering graduate from the University of Connecticut with a minor in human rights. He is currently attending the University of Connecticut School of Medicine as a second-year student.
Thank you, Chelsea, for the introduction. So we can just get the slides up. So I want to thank everyone for coming out to learn about the Education Project today. So when Asim and I started the Education Project, we were just thinking of how can we get in there? How can we make a difference during this COVID time? What can we do as volunteers? We just wanted to get involved and get started. And, you know, we put together a very basic website. We put together a small team, and we were just like, let's see where this goes. Let's see where this takes us. Let's try to provide some educational support to students in need. When we got involved in the project, we got a lot of great volunteers on board. We were inspired by our tutors, inspired by the families that we served, and inspired by the impact that what we could achieve and what we could do. And that's what kind of brought us to scaling this up and launching it and working with Humanity First to create this platform. We believe that, you know, this is how we started the Education Project, but now it's so much more than that. And we think that we can do a lot of great work through this program. It has a lot of potential, and we've come through a lot of challenges, and we think that we want to serve both locally and nationally. So we have a lot of, you know, desire for this to be a national project. When we look at the statistic here, we can see, you know, this is why we're here. 6.8 months is how much the average student falls behind if schools reopen in January. And looking at this, we knew we needed to do something, and we knew we needed to start somewhere. So this is why we're all here today, to talk about this problem of students struggling with online learning. Now, when we look closely at that data, when we look even more so into it, we see that it's not just 6.8 months that students are falling behind. Low-income families are falling a year behind. Hispanic and Black Americans are falling 9 to 10 months behind. So there is a disparity, and we need to do something about this disparity. That's why the education project is free. That's why we are targeting those underserved communities that have historically been facing these challenges. And with COVID-19, students are logging in less to their online coursework. So when the schools transition online, low-income families are seeing a 50% decrease in participation. And that's a very staggering statistic when we consider middle-income families are around 30% decrease and high-income families they're staying steady. So to us, this shows us that we need to take action now. We cannot wait. But we understand that these disparities, because of COVID-19 in education, it's been going on for a while. These are systemic problems, problems that our country has been facing for a long time, that educators, parents, and families have been facing. The average student, the average difference between funding for a poor non-white student and an affluent white student is $2,600. So we know there's a difference in the funding that they're receiving. And we know there's a difference in the education that they're receiving. They're lagging behind. Low-income families are around 3 years behind high-income students. And we know that there's a racial element to this. 87% of white students performing better senior year, 12th grade, than Black students is a problem. And so we see these issues and we see these challenges at a systemic level and realize that we needed to take action. And that's where we approach this problem. Now we understand that these educational challenges that our community faces, it's not going to be solved it's not going to be solved overnight, and it's not going to be solved by one group. We're going to have to work together, and we're going to have to make a difference by coming together to address these problems and doing whatever we can and taking a stand of action. So there's some good news. African American students and white students receiving comparable levels of instruction achieve comparable levels of reading skill. So we know that if we give them adequate education, we give Black students adequate education, they perform just as well as white students. And we also know that individualized tutoring makes a big difference. The average student receiving individualized tutoring performed about 98% compared to the conventional classroom. So we know that this can make a difference. And that's where we're coming at from the education project, because if we as volunteers can do whatever we can in our capacity to give some time and get involved in this project, then we believe that we can kind of bridge that gap and provide that comparable instruction to achieve that comparable performance. This is our vision, and this is where we're going about it. So I think two things that stand to me about the education project is we wanted to take action. We didn't want to wait. We wanted to get involved in this problem now. And we also knew that we needed to adapt and learn as we went. We knew that everything that we're going to do is not going to be perfect, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to try to make a difference. We want to provide high quality tutoring and mentorship. But beyond this, our vision is that our volunteers will be able to make a difference in individual students' lives. For some families, it may just be catching up over the summer and improving my reading, or catching up over the summer and learning a little bit of math. Maybe that's what some families want. But for some families, the element of mentorship, the element of, I'm a new student that's going to have confidence. I'm going to approach learning with more vigor, with more enthusiasm, with more energy, and I have someone looking out for me. That's our long-term vision. So even if a few students get there, then it'll be worth everything for us to have gone through this project. And our vision is that we want to provide the highest quality that we can. We want to channel our volunteers and make them feel like they can get involved and they can do something about this problem, both at a national level and through the capacity of Humanity First, its international network. We believe that this will go on to become an international project and develop systems for different nations. So I want to thank the team. Over the last few months, they've worked day and night to put everything together and get this project launched. We have our core team of around 10 or so volunteers, and we have many volunteers in our different departments, such as outreach, digital media, tutor onboarding, and tutor education. And again, I want to thank them because it really means a lot to me what they've accomplished in such a short amount of time. So now I want to get into how the education project works. So we're lucky to have our tech team of Sinan, who designed our front end, and Rob, who designed the back end. Basically, the main things from our website is the student and tutor registration forms. So it made it very easy so that students can easily get involved and sign up, parents can sign them up, and tutors for easily, just fill out a few information, give a few documents, and you're on your way to applying to be a tutor. But I think where the magic of the website is in the back end, where we're able to take the information that students and tutors provide and use our algorithm to match them based on similar subjects, based on similar grade levels, based on similar languages, based on similar interests. So we can take the student data, we can take the tutor data and put it together to create efficient, high quality matches so that the tutors feel like they're able to get involved in a subject that they want to tutor and work on something that they want to do. And the students are able to get to the need that they need for whatever their educational needs are. So that's the treasure behind the website, and creating these one-on-one matches where there's a mentorship element of it, and both parties can kind of benefit in this way of being able to get their needs. So you can see the map. It's pretty clear that our tutor network has become a national phenomenon with 26 different states and districts and over 40 universities. We have a lot of great universities involved, both public and private. And it's really exciting to meet tutors from all these different locations and get their perspectives. Our tutors are very high achieving students. They have put a lot of time into this with over 850 active tutoring hours. To put in perspective, private tutoring, one-on-one tutoring typically costs around $30 an hour at least. So we're talking a $30,000 time investment from these tutors. As I mentioned, they're academically successful and they speak a lot of different languages. They're very diverse. But what stands out to me about the tutors is two things, really. One, their passion and enthusiasm for getting involved and making a difference in their families, doing whatever it takes to make a difference in their families. I've seen tutors where they were no longer able to provide services, but they wanted to make sure that the tutor that was going to continue with their parent knew exactly what the student's needs were. So I've seen tutors like that, and then their determination to adapt and grow. Some families, as you know, will not have the same internet access or the computer access that other families might have. And I've seen tutors do their sessions through, I've heard of tutors that have done their sessions through WhatsApp. So they've been inventive and they've tried to find ways to work with these students and make something happen. And I think that's really speaks volumes to who they are as people. I want to talk a little bit about our tutor onboarding process. So what we want to do is provide quality tutors with successful matches so that they have a great experience, and provide parents with a safe and reliable tutor so that they feel comfortable and confident in the services that we're providing. To do this, we have a lot of different steps in our process, and it's a pretty good flow. We take a student on after, a tutor on after they apply. We go through their reference, we go through their interview, we do a background check, and we kind of get a basic sense of who the tutor is and where they're coming from. And then once they're accepted into our program, we do an orientation session. So we have professional tutors, professional teachers and professional tutors that can provide these orientations and kind of catch our tutors up with the tutoring process and working online with students. After that, we use Rob's system to create a tutor and student match so that parents are able to set up a meeting with those tutors and basically interview and get to know them. That first meeting provides an opportunity to get consent from our parent, so the parent feels, okay, I'm comfortable with this tutor, I can trust this tutor, and the tutor feels like, okay, I can work with this student and this is something that's within my domain and I feel comfortable providing this educational support. Then from there, we have supervised tutoring sessions supervised by the parents themselves, and that happens on average 2 hours a week, but it's flexible depending on the parents and depending on the student's needs and depending on the tutor's schedule. And we just kind of follow up and get feedback to see how things are going. That's basically our process in a nutshell. So I think one of the elements that really is important to us is tutor education. Basically being able to provide our tutors with quality resources and a quality network so they feel like, if there's a challenge that I haven't faced before as a tutor, there's support that's available to me from the education project. That support comes in the form of our orientation. So I mentioned we have professional teachers that provide the basics and provide a lot of guidance from their years of experience teaching and working with students. We're working on developing focus groups. So learning from tutors' struggles and challenges and successes and being able to put together best practices and figure out what we need to focus on as a team together is really important. Developing training videos. So, if tutors want to know how to connect with the student at a motivational level, how to deal with diversity in the tutoring environment, how to get the teacher involved. We're trying to develop these training videos to make these tasks really easy and efficient for tutors to understand. and provide that quality instruction. And then I think the most important element of it is creating a community where we have a Discord group where our tutors can share their updates, share what's on their mind, learn from each other, and connect. I think that's a really powerful part of being a tutor with the education project. So I want to talk a little bit about our outreach. So we mentioned trying to target those students in need. So on the left, you can see a map of Hartford, Connecticut, one of the locations that we are working to provide tutoring services for. And we look at which areas of Hartford have the most need. So we look at poverty rate, we look at diversity, we look at the Hispanic population and the Black population, and where those neighborhoods and communities are, and trying to reach those neighborhoods and communities. We look at the educational performance. So on the top left, you can see data from a school in Hartford. There's a 38% chronically absent rate at this school. So this is clearly a problem. 38% of students are chronically absent. 98% of these students are minorities. 93% of these students are receiving free or reduced lunches. So we want to look, and we can see the English and math performances of these schools. So we want to look at these schools. We want to understand what are their challenges and make sure that we're targeting those schools that have a need. And how do we do this? We want to develop partnerships. So we are establishing partnerships with different schools and districts to provide that need where it's needed in terms of our tutoring services. And also connecting with different nonprofits, whether it's a soup kitchen, whether it's a library, working with people at the grassroots and local level, but also creating an open model so that anyone across the country can have access to our services. We're still going to be focusing on communities of need, but we're going to be able to make sure that those communities that we're sharing this message with have a need, and we do our research to make sure that's the case. So I have the map here on the right. These are some of the initial locations that we're focusing on across the country. I apologize. I think the spatial distance between Puerto Rico and Florida is not adequate, but you'll just have to forgive me on that one. So we can go to the next slide. I think one of the most rewarding aspects of the education project experience is hearing from our tutors and hearing from our parents and getting the feedback that we received. So overall, tutors and parents had a great experience. You can see the average rating from our parents out of 10 was a 9.7. We've had the chance to serve over 100 students, and many students that have been with our service for a long time have reported improvements in their educational performance for their child. But I think what really stands out is the stories, the experiences. And here you can see a few stories and experiences from tutors and parents. One that really comes to my mind is I had a chance to talk to a parent on the phone a few days earlier, and I was just asking about the experience, and she talked to me about two things that really stuck out to me. One was how the tutor that she had for her child was able to take real life concepts and give tips and tricks that would help her son understand math. So being able to apply this in real life was really rewarding and making that connection. I think another thing that really stuck out to me was the level of confidence that her son had gained through the program. And I think that's really what I want to see, because when we see that a student is making confidence, or a student's making progress, or a student feels more passionate about education, then we can hope that this is going to be a building point for them to work off of and continue to grow in their learning. And that's really what we want to see. We're going to do the best we can to kind of learn and continue to get feedback from their experiences, but it has been a great experience so far. So I think another really special aspect about the education project is just as our tutors learn to get involved and take action, just as they learn to adapt and grow, so can you all become a part of this project and do the same things. There are many different ways to be involved and support the education project. You can be a volunteer at different fronts, whether it's through Tutor, providing the educational support, or whether it's through our management processes, whether it's through our onboarding, whether it's through our outreach, whether it's through our educational development. There's many ways to become a volunteer and support this work. Similarly, we are building partnerships across the country, partnerships with nonprofits, partnerships with soup kitchens, partnerships with schools and districts and universities to get quality tutors that can support and build our network and get students that need the services and need the support at this time. So you can help us by building these partnerships and relationships. You can donate on our website, theeduproject.net, and you can basically help us expand this project to reach more students. I mentioned how we want to take this to the international front, and we want to expand across the nation. And to do that, your donation will directly support the educational needs of these students. A large part of what we've done so far has been on a very minimal budget, thanks to the effort and support of our tutors and volunteers giving their time out to support the education of others. And of course, you can spread the message, share the word for the Education Project on social media, share it within your personal networks, and follow us and provide your feedback so we can continue to learn and grow. So with that, here are our social media links. You can see that for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We have our LinkedIn, and you can email us and reach out to us anytime at theeducationproject@us.humanefirst.org. So with that, I want to turn it back over to Chelsea and thank everyone for your time, and really excited to see what our tutors have done so far and see what we'll all be able to do together moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Harass. The Education Project is fortunate to have our first keynote speaker, Dr. Vasila Rodney. He will present about personalizing learning during the pandemic times. Dr. Rodney is an associate professor of education technology at Webster University with a focus on the professional development of educators and the enhancement of learning environments with digital age technologies. Of additional importance to Dr. Rodney is the equity of access and the level of personalization that mobile technologies provide for traditionally underserved and marginalized learners. And with that, I introduce Dr. Rodney.
Thank you, Chelsea. I appreciate the invitation to speak at this very auspicious gathering. I'm very happy to see the energy of your team here and of the Education Project team. Thank you, Mr. Naeem, for inviting me to participate, and congratulations, Harass, on a wonderful project. I've been watching the chat. We know that there are some issues with the slides. The slides will be made available after the presentation, and we'll make sure we reach out to our attendees with those. And the presentation will also be recorded. So I want to talk really quickly about this whole issue of personalization, and I want to come from a kind of perspective of what I think education is about. As was stated earlier, I'm a professor at Webster University in St. Louis, and here at Webster, our passion is serving the underserved on a principle of innovation. We were one of the first universities to go wholesale online and build online programs, and to have global campuses as a part of our inherent structure. And that's because of our strong interest, again, in meeting the needs of communities and people all over the world, and using technology to leverage those needs. So in that sense, I want to be clear that, when I speak about this issue, I'll be talking from the standpoint of technology, and also a question of autonomy and what I describe as democracy. That is, having learners have a sense of autonomy about their own learning and being supportive of where they want to go and the values they have. We also want to foreground the idea of shared opportunity and accessibility. COVID has shifted a lot of these elements, as you've heard before in Harass's presentation. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Okay, next slide, please. So as I was thinking about what to talk about, two things kind of formed in my mind: personalized learning in a context of everybody in quarantine at home, and craving the social, right? I think a lot of us right now are in that space, and even some of the young learners that we're talking about this week, as we talk about going to school and going back to school, there's a deep interest for the kids to return to school. I was just at school yesterday with my own kids picking up devices, and they were so excited to be in the building. So why not talk about social learning? Well, because I think a lot of our engagement today, as you guys can see, is really about the individual learner and the supports we need to build for them, right? So I want to kind of come from that perspective as well. Next slide. So we're going to talk about, what I think about individual agency in learning, what I describe also as a singularity, a shifting moment right now. And then I'm going to have a question for the audience. You may not be able to respond because I'm kind of floating through this in like 15 minutes, but I'll invite your commentary. And then one of the big questions I have is, can we go back to the pre-COVID times? And then new possibilities and risks. So I will try to cover that in my 15 minutes. So I did a quick survey of some of our tutors and Education Project people over the last week. And the one thing we kind of agreed on was that we ultimately believe that the role of a tutor or a volunteer is to support the learner so that she can develop her own capabilities in a subject area. That sense of autonomy, I think we all believe is very critical to learning. And in a way, that's what brings us to this project, right? So I want us to kind of keep that at the forefront of our mind, that we all agree that fundamentally what we're trying to do is to empower learners to empower themselves. So the singularity, COVID-19 today, where we sit now. And I kind of put these three columns in front of you. I kind of make them empty. If I was in a lecture hall where I could get lots of feedback, I'd ask you these questions, right? So what was education like before COVID? What is education like right now during COVID? And what will education be like after COVID? And those are kind of like the three big thought questions I have in my mind that I think we can run through when we think about projects like the education project and the meaning they have for young people that obviously need these kinds of supports. Next. Skip this part because we're not going to do the survey. But the thought question for that survey question was simply, can schools go back to the way they were? And we're not really 100% sure that that's even possible, right? But we understand that there's a lot of changes coming up on us. So in the 2017-2018 academic year, 21% of America's public schools and 13% of America's private schools at the K-12 level was building online learning programs. And so students in these schools were experiencing online learning in some way, not necessarily in like a complete total way, but they were kind of being exposed, maybe a course here or a session there with online learning. So in the pre-COVID world, we had started this kind of online connectedness around education. Next. There was also an emergence of flexible learning arrangements. Some school districts were working with what we call the 4-day school week. Across the United States, this map demonstrates that 25 states had already had one district that was on a model of a 4-day school week. And what was driving this was budgeting, right? As school districts were becoming tightened and straightened for funding, they started to become creative about how to support students. And one of the things they came up with is to have 1 day a week eliminated from the school schedule and extend the other days by about 40 minutes. And across the country, they were doing that. Here in Missouri, a number of school districts have done it. In Colorado, many school districts have done it. Schools are also playing with flex periods, right? These things we call like genius hour, where an hour was given back to students to use for autonomous project creation and those kinds of things. The other element that was developing really quickly was remote work. The new economy that we're talking about and the disruption, especially brought on by COVID-19, that has taken us all fundamentally to becoming flex workers in a way. Prior to that, 29% of workers in 2017 said they were prepared to work from home. And if you go to the next slide, please, that 3 in 5 of those workers were feeling like they would stay. They preferred to work from home, right? So that means our workforce was shifting, that workers were starting to think working from home could be a normal thing to do, right? Next. So what that tells us is that the demographics was shifting, and what happens with COVID-19 kind of shatters the slow pace of that shift and kind of took us all wholesale online. But I want to foreground some elements here because they have to do with equity later on. What has even made it possible for us to operate during COVID-19 as people who can work online, right? And then be educated online. So I've put together maybe 6 of these. Number one, computing technologies. We all know we're experiencing that right now. We're all kind of remote as we participate in this webinar. Some of us are on phones, some of us are on computers, right? Broadband availability across the United States. Now, again, this is not everywhere. There are some equity issues that emerge as well, but in general, in the technology and the infrastructure is there. And of course, cheap software and applications. Zoom is free. In the old days, you bought video conferencing equipment. Now you don't. It's just a part of what we have. Secondly, another set of other, what I would describe as kind of soft skills have also help us with this shift. So technical skill. Somebody's running this Zoom and they're not in the same room with me. So I can start a Zoom and they can run it. So the technical skills that are country needs is in place to some degree. And obviously teacher knowledge. Teachers themselves have a level of skill that allows them to literally shift to the online world at a rapid pace, right? And of course, there are questions about, you know, the quality of that shift, but we can talk about that. The reality is that that shift is there. Students and schools were already dealing with one-to-one programs in some ways. There are many schools that already had one-to-one programs with Chromebooks, with iPads, other kinds of technologies. And then we cannot discount our learners, right? The tutors were talking about being able to support the learners through things like WhatsApp on what? Mobile phones, right? So our kids have the ability to pick up these devices as early as they are, as young as they are, and to engage with the world using a mobile phone, using a laptop computer that's network connected. So this new frontier has produced the outcome that we kind of have and that we're talking about today. And that outcome is projects like the Education Project. It's obviously a wonderful project, and I see lots more space for it to scale and grow, and many other projects like it to emerge, because the infrastructure and the platform is there, and there are still going to be gaps. In this particular instance, we see where tutors and teachers can deliver learning opportunities and learning supports globally and with flexibility. In this case, a group of young people came together, said, what can we do in the middle of a crisis? Reach out across the country, and now planning the world to engage with learners and families who can then come in and benefit from this kind of passion engagement, because the infrastructure and technology is there, the opportunities are there. So the big thought question for me then is, you know, how do we redefine teaching and learning to make it more personal? Because one tutor and one student is ultimately, to me, the ideal form of education. Each student having access to the teacher they want or need in the moment they have access to that. More equitable, regardless of your language group, your socioeconomic status, your race, your ethnicity. You have access to tutors that may speak your language, look like you, and can help you to move to the next level of learning and activity. More accessibility for special needs students, who we know, especially during COVID-19, so many of them were left behind because schools just could not keep up with all of the pieces that need to move. More interactive, all right? Again, being able to involve learners in the experience. More social, we can't forget that, because we're all social animals, and our kids need to have other people that they're connecting with. And obviously more accelerated, that learning loss that Harass was talking about, making sure that kids don't fall behind and then ultimately stay behind. Having systems that allow us, you know, again, projects like these to continue to help to keep our students on pace and make them successful. Next slide. So I'm gonna pause kind of like here, because I want to just kind of point out some of the other parts of what we need to be doing, which is leveraging applications and tools that allow us to get the information from learners. Who are they? How do they come to the learning environment? I see in the chat here, some of our families are talking about how successful the project was in their lives, right? So having a tutor who kind of meet you where you're at, whether it's through an interview process, an observation process, some kind of onboarding process to meet the needs of each learner. Next, so instructional analysis becomes important. Instructional delivery, we're seeing it in action. Having intelligent tools and applications that are able to, in this case, tutor matching, not just in terms of race and ethnicity and ability, but also maybe learning ability or learning preference of students, right? Getting to that place where you can kind of learn with the kind of partner that will help your learning in the most idealized way. Next. Instructional assessments, ongoing capture of information about how well students are doing. And again, at the individual level, not just saying, well, the whole group is doing well, but learning about each child and how each child is finding themselves successful prior to the learning situation, during that situation, and then afterwards, in this case, these tutoring situations. And building platforms that do that well, of course, are needed. Now, there's always a case that we have to keep in mind, especially when we're talking about kids. The risks, right? Equity and access, we talk a lot about that, but data privacy, we in the United States have these laws about maintaining the privacy of especially early learners, maintaining the security of early learners. I think it's important to keep those in front of us, obviously, because of the dangers of the global and of course the networked. And in Europe, the European Union, they have even stronger laws. So I think it's important to keep those kinds of elements in view, identity security as well as physical security. We know that network devices can create all kinds of challenges for young people who can literally be drawn away. And so it's important to have these kinds of protections in place, even as we see the kind of potential of this new digital age and the shifts that are in front of us that are coming. These are kind of like my initial thoughts. I want to thank you again for coming to the launch, and I'm so honored and happy to be here. And hopefully I've kind of teased your mind about where we are and where we can be going, and maybe encouraged you yourself to join the education project or support it in ways that can help our children and our young people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rodney, for providing these insights. Dr. Rodney has also agreed to serve on our advisory board, and we look forward to continuing working with you. Next, we would like to welcome Dr. Glenn Matoma, who will be presenting on human rights in education during the pandemic. Dr. Glenn Matoma is an assistant professor of human rights and education, jointly appointed with the Human Rights Institute and the Niag School of Education at the University of Connecticut. Dr. Matoma has served as director of the Thomas J. Dodd Research Center since 2013, and has focused on increasing the Dodd Center's impact on the realization of human rights in Connecticut and beyond. Dr. Matoma's first book, Human Rights and the Negotiation of American Power, was published in 2013 as part of the Pennsylvania Studies in Human Rights series. And with that, I introduce Dr. Matoma.
Many thanks, Chelsea. Thanks to everybody for inviting me. Humanity United, congratulations, as well as the Education Project. Special shout out and congratulations to Harass and to Gowrie as alumni of the Yukon Human Rights Program. You've done us incredibly proud. And I know there's lots of Huskies in the audience. I was perusing through the participants, so I think you're doing a lot of us proud. So congratulations. And again, thank you for inviting me today. I think it's a great opportunity to highlight what is an essential program that I think you'll see from my presentation fits clearly within the human rights framework. Although that maybe hasn't been named yet, I think it's really important, and that's really where I'm gonna focus today. So if you want to go to the next slide, you know, in many ways I'm going to cover a few things that that you've already seen today. It's clear that there are tremendous human rights impacts from COVID-19. First and foremost, in the health sector, we have over 25 million cases around the world, 800,000 deaths. It has been an absolutely devastating public health crisis. That too has led to an economic crisis, and rights to health go hand in hand with economic rights. We've seen, you know, the worst levels of unemployment since the Great Depression. The right to housing is threatened as millions face eviction. We see that this is a photograph of a lineup. We saw one from, I think it's from Houston as well. So I know Humanity First is working, you know, with food banks that has had, you know, kind of unprecedented levels of need out there. So the right to work, the right to housing, the right to food, all under threat. And then, of course, this is exacerbated by existing levels of racial discrimination and injustice the world over. The pandemic, of course, finds all of these weaknesses in our system and makes them worse. In the United States, of course, we've seen a summer of increased activism with respect to anti-Black racism in law enforcement and extrajudicial violence. It's also worth noting that the pandemic itself inspires its own form of racism with heightened levels of anti-Asian sentiment, targeting of individuals with language like the Kung flu or the China virus being used to racialize this health crisis. And then finally, all of this adds up to, you know, a broader crisis within democracy. We've seen how this coronavirus has also exacerbated the slide toward authoritarianism in all parts of the globe. This is a photograph from from Hong Kong. China, of course, their authoritarian, rule there has tightened its grip in many ways, ostensibly to control the virus. And in other locations, you know, whether that's Brazil or the Philippines or even here in the United States, we've seen the way in which authoritarian rulers have been using a kind of divide and rule strategy that has found its way into our politics about what should be pretty straightforward healthcare decisions, right? So the right, wearing a mask has all of a sudden become politicized in ways that has made the spread of the virus that much worse. And then, of course, the right to education, and that's where I want to concentrate for the rest of this this presentation. If you want to go back a little bit. So the shuttering of schools across the world and in the United States beginning in March threw millions of children out of the stable access for education. In fact, a recent UNICEF report estimates almost 500 million children worldwide have no reliable access to human rights, to the right to education. Within the UN system, the right to education is often kind of broken up into this kind of 4 A's heuristic. The education should be available, should be accessible, should be acceptable, and should be adaptable. Accessible meaning, right, that there's enough investment in infrastructure, both physical plant as well as technology to make it available to students. Accessible meaning that every student everywhere has equal access to the available education. So regardless of gender, race, income. Acceptable, that means that the education provided is of sufficient quality to meet the needs of the community. And then adaptable, that the education is flexible, both responsive to the kind of cultural identity of local communities, but also the unique needs of different learners. And in each of these dimensions, available, accessible, acceptable, and adaptable, we can see that the coronavirus has significantly degraded the realization of the right to education. It's also worth noting that one of the things that's become readily apparent to many of us, as the schools have closed, is how schooling sits at the intersection of many of our human rights. It's not an accident that once the schools close, that ability both to for parents to work, right, because they no longer have reliable health care, or the access to food, right? Many children got their only stable meal of the day delivered them through their schools, or the right to safety, right? That the kind of safe environment of the school provided many children respite from tumultuous home environments or violence in the community. So the centering on the human rights framework and the right to education reminds of another kind of human rights, UN human rights framework, the idea of interconnection and interdependence. This virus has revealed in dramatic new ways how all of these things are intertwined, and that addressing one requires us to address them all. Okay, so next slide, please. So I'm actually a historian by training, and so I want to take us a little step back, to the origins of this human rights framework. And in fact, this notion of a human right to education, a global human right for everybody to have access to education, is relatively new. It was first codified. Actually, if you go back for a second, it was first codified after. One more, sorry, ping-ponging here, right? So that's, I want everybody to get a good look at Eleanor there, right? So that's Eleanor Roosevelt, 1948, holding a copy of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, drafted by the United Nations in the wake of the Second World War. The human rights framework emerges from a time of catastrophe, emerges from a time of crisis. And, certainly Harass and Gary and the other alum of the human rights program at UConn will know all this stuff. But I think it's important to point out that in many respects, the vision put forward of a post-World War II world contained in the Universal Declaration was one that was attempting to build a, not just a kind of peace in which there's no war, right, a kind of negative peace, but a positive peace in which the humanity and dignity of each and every person on the planet can be respected. And the framework that they came up with, this Universal Declaration of Human Rights, puts education actually at its center. So if you want to go ahead and take a look, I want you to look at the Article 26, which is the right to education. So if you can click forward, right? So Article 26, the Universal Declaration has economic, social, and cultural rights at an even plane with the traditional civil and political. And the right to education, while it traditionally has been with the economic and social rights, is really the first among equals. There was no debate about including the right to education. There was no controversy. There was universality among the drafters to include it. And you can see here in Article 26, that first stanza is that everyone has the right to education, full stop. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. Elementary education shall be compulsory. Technical and professional education shall be made generally available, and higher education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. And this first paragraph of Article 26 was really kind of common sense. They put it in there, and the idea was that any feasible post-war world would need to guarantee this kind of education for everyone. During the drafting process, however, one of the observers of the Human Rights Commission raised their hand and said, you know what, I think this is not enough. I think this is not enough because I remember that before the war, in fact, the country that did the best on providing education to nearly everyone was in fact Germany. Right? The Germans, great educational innovators, kindergarten, right? It's not too bad. They had a very robust national system of public education. And of course, the Nazi Party turned that into a weapon of death and destruction by indoctrinating youth into an ideology of fear and hatred. So they added a second paragraph. Go ahead. Paragraph 2. And this is really important. This is really essential. Again, it gets to this connection between education and the broader human rights movement. It says, education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, racial and religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. We can click one more. They added one more paragraph as well. Parents should have the prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. So these two later additions, I think it's really important to remember, say, it's not just any education that people have a right to. It's the kind of education that allows them to develop their full humanity. Their full humanity. Okay, next slide. So in more recent years, this has been codified in the notion of not just a human right to education, but human rights education. There's a 2011 Declaration on Human Rights Education and Training, which defines human rights education, which goes further than that Article 26 and talks about it here. So I won't read this whole Article 2. I'll just note that at the end, that the purpose given to this education is to empower them, the learner, to contribute to the building and promotion of a universal culture of human rights. Next slide. And that to do that, they have to recognize that education encompasses 3 dimensions. It's not just about the content, right? But it's about the purpose and about the method. So we talk about education about human rights, which should include understanding human rights norms and principles and the values that underpin them, the mechanisms, things like the UDHR, et cetera, but also education through human rights. That schooling, that all educational features should take place in a context where everybody's human rights are respected. And finally, education for human rights. The idea that education should be, at the end of the day, about advancing respect for human rights and the capacity of each individual and each community to uphold them. Okay, next slide. So go ahead and click and add all these. So coming back to this, right? This is where I started, which is to say all these human rights impacts, including education. And of course, all of you know, and we've talked about it several times, that none of this started just in this year, in 2020. None of these are new. In fact, if we had had a robust culture of human rights across the globe, then it would be a completely different story. We would still have a public health crisis, but we would perhaps have the capacity to meet that challenge in new ways. And so what I want to suggest about the education project, and this is really interesting because I heard it both from Dr. Rodney and from Harass in your presentations, that one of the kind of key features in this is that one-to-one connection, is that ability to build relationships that aren't just about kind of academic achievement. In fact, that academic achievement at the end of the day ends up being a side effect of what is the true value of these connections, which is that sense of common humanity, that sense of caring for one another, that sense of our ability to meet each other's needs and to move each other forward. And so, it's that what I want to leave you with, that really what we have here is a human rights project in its grandest sense. Although it's simple, right? It's about just kind of pairing these volunteer tutors with younger students in need. It's actually revolutionary. And so let's hit that last slide, because not only is education a human rights, but the drafters of the UDHR actually put it at the center of how all human rights were going to be realized. This is a stanza from the preamble. It says, "Now therefore the General Assembly proclaims this universal declaration of human rights as a common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations, to the end that every individual and every organ of society, keeping this declaration constantly in mind, shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms." So shall strive through teaching and education. And it's for that that I'm very grateful to have been included and for the education project. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Matoma, for speaking on the human rights heart of our project. Next, we would like to conclude with a few notes from our co-founder, Azam Ahmed. Azam is a recent graduate of Johns Hopkins University and works as a quality engineer in the medical device field.
Hello, everyone. My name is Asim Ahmed. I'm the co-founder of the Education Project. At this point, I would like to thank our speakers, Dr. Rodney, Dr. Matoma, Mr. Munim Naeem, and Harass Qureshi again. I want to thank Chelsea for serving as our moderator, and thank each of you for joining our event. Before we play the recognition video, I wanted to personally thank all of our tutors for dedicating their time and volunteering to improve the education of our students. Without further ado, we will end with a video recognizing the efforts of our tutors.
Hello, my name is Aaron. I'm 10 years old and I'm in 5th grade. I would like to thank James for his hard work, patience, and teaching me advanced math.
And also for the education project, it helped me learn and made me smarter.
Miss Miguel, you are a great tutor and I had a lot of fun and you helped me a lot in math.
My tutor was Kanoa. She was an amazing tutor. Thank you, Kanoa. Hi, Milan. Thank you so much for being an amazing tutor. I greatly appreciate your dedication to meet with me several times a week and your genuine passion to help me as much as you can.
Hi, I'm Emery. I have learned, thank you, and I have learned so much from our classes that we have done.
Thank you, Miss Jessica, for teaching me how to read and my sight books and the math. I read one book and I'm excited for kindergarten.
My name is Joshua and Manny.
Okay. What do you want to say about Daniela?
She's really nice and you get to learn new things.
I love this. You love the school, I'm sure. You love the teaching, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I do too. We thank God for having you guys help us with tutoring. Joshua, this is a tutoring program that is very good. What do you say?
Nothing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for playing that video. It's very special, at least personally to me, to see that one of my student is actually in that video as well, the one that I'm tutoring. So thank you everyone for being part of our launch event. We're excited to be launching the education project on the Humanity First platform. Over the past few months, we have grown tremendously thanks to our tutors, our leadership team, and our administrative volunteers. Right now, we have over 200 tutors and students registered within our system. However, our goal is to kind of grow that number out to 500 tutors and students before the end of the year. We are currently developing partnerships with additional volunteer groups to provide further educational enrichment to our students. We are also working on translating all our material into Spanish as well as other languages. Please consider volunteering your time with us to make our resources more readily available to all parents and students. Additionally, if you're interested in helping out the education project, we always welcome more motivated tutors. Please consider this volunteer opportunity for 2 to 3 hours per week. Other than that, you can always donate on our website, follow us on social media, or partner with us to provide additional resources and material to students. This event has been recorded and will be uploaded on our website, theeduproject.net, for public viewing. If you have any questions or feedback, please email us at theeducationproject@us.humanityfirst.org. We will also be emailing a feedback form and a newsletter sign up to each of you in the coming days. If you did not register on the Eventbrite, please comment your email in the comments section and we'll be in touch. I really hope you guys enjoyed this event. Have a great rest of your Saturday. Thank you.